Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back here to Super Sunday here on Apex Racing TV and part 2 of the Weekend Warriors, that being the Spec Racer Fords. My name is Ron Mullins, alongside me in the commentary booth is Charles Bichelle, and in the virtual production hall with our old friend Samuli Kumo. Today we're racing at a street circuit with a checkered and yet storied past, that being Belle Isle. It's a track that is sadly no longer used in real life, but thankfully is preserved here in the sim. Now, Charles, you have some experience covering these Spec Racer Ford races here at this track, so it's fair to say that coming up for these drivers will probably be the most uncomfortable 45 minutes of their life. What do you think?
I think you're absolutely right. We talked about this a little earlier with the Formula 4s. These cars are bigger, so the plus side is they can take a little bit of damage off the wall. They can take a couple of wall strikes relatively easily. But however, they're also bigger than the Formula Fords, so there's a lot less room for passing and side-by-side racing. And it's still critical to make sure you get the proper line through these corners. Once again, we talked about it. You got to be very precise here. And this is no exception with the spec racers. It's another one of those where you need to have your lines right, and you need to watch what you're doing with the curbs, because they will absolutely send you into the wall if you are just even the slightest bit off.
It's an absolute razor-thin margin of error that these drivers are going to be quite flirtatious with all throughout this race. We kind of half-joked about what we said during the Formula Ford broadcast earlier on today, that the challenging corners on this track are pretty much all of them from turn 1 all the way up to the kink of turn 14. And I think here with these Spec Racer Fords, which are a little bit, they dance around a little bit more, and they are a bit bigger than the Formula Fords that we had earlier on this afternoon, I think that is definitely the case. We're having a chat with our buddy here at Apex Racing TV, that being Josh Wilkie, who is the producer for the Formula Ford broadcast earlier. He is on track here for this race, and he was talking about the main trouble with this race being just the weight balance of these Spec Racer Ford cars changes like every 5 milliseconds, it feels like. I was kind of half joking when I told him that quote, but he pretty much agreed with me, because this track, the bumps are so pervasive here at the circuit. There pretty much is no section of this track where that wheel isn't being yanked from one side to another, just hitting a pothole or hitting some sort of seam in the asphalt or concrete. It is a huge factor here in this race, and we're going to see that quite a lot here this afternoon. So we're currently in this qualifying session. I mentioned 45 minutes of uncomfortableness here for these drivers, and even though we have a 40-minute race, we still have an uncomfortable, well, that's actually more than 5 minutes here left to go here in this qualifying session. And as things stand at the moment, it's this man, Marco Panero, in the number 16 car, leading them right now at a 140.158. These Spec Racer Fords actually setting in slower lap times than the Formula Fords that we saw earlier on this afternoon. But Marco Panero has been a standout star so far this season, currently on provisional pole as things stand at the moment, with about 7 minutes left to go here. And then looking through the rest of the field, Chris Montgomery, who won last time, actually skipped the point there. Marco Panero won last time at Rudskogen, the doubleheader that we had there, and Chris Montgomery, the winner in the S2 category, who finished P13 overall. They're looking through. He is in, I'm looking through, I don't think he's currently inside the top 25 right now here in this qualifying session, so not ideal for Chris Montgomery. We'll see what he can do. Currently, it's our buddy Josh Wilkie in P number 9, second of the drivers in the S2 class. And then it was Jorg Mani, the top of the Masters, in P4 in that race. And currently, I'm looking through, I don't see him inside the top 25 either, so not a very good segue. He's currently parked there. A nice little,
there's where he is.
Own cozy nook. That's, yeah.
Yeah, so these guys have a tendency to find little holes in which to just kind of goof off. As we see, somebody came in, the 905 car just came in and just took everybody out. So York hasn't set a time yet. That's why you don't see him on the screen. So I thought it was very interesting. I watched most of practice, at least was keeping up with the times. Maurizio Naselli, who we've seen, our hard charger, who just comes from the back week in and week out, was really fast here during practice. Was either I would say he was on the podium for most practice as far as his lap time. And I'm just going to find it very interesting if he decides to pit start this race, what kind of challenge it's going to be for him to work his way through the field at this track. It'll be something we'll have to keep an eye on during the course of the race.
Oh, it is a massive curveball. We mentioned during the Formula Ford broadcast earlier that there's only real 2 key overtaking opportunities on this entire circuit, that being the heavy braking zone of turn number 3 that's coming up for Jeff Frischter in just a few moments' time. Currently, he's jumped up to 9th here in this qualifying session. Nice time there for the Masters driver. But heading into turn number 3, there's a great overtaking opportunity if you're any of these drivers, and also an opportunity to have some sort of major schmozzle there as he caught up to that. I believe that was Wilson Roscoe, I believe, that he called up to. Actually, no, that was Paulo Brema there. Wilson runs the number 555 in the Formula Ford, so I looked at the 555 of the car spinning around like a top, and I just thought that it was him. It was not. It was Brema, who's only 2 positions ahead of him right now. Splitting the difference was that man, Jim Brewster. So I mentioned that we have a lot of drivers running up towards the front that we tend to expect, and we are 8 rounds into the season with tonight's festivities here. So I think we'll probably have a good idea as to who's going to be finishing up towards the front of the points. We'll take a look at those now while we're still in this qualifying session with about 4 minutes left to go here. In S1, it's still pretty close. Jason Green there at the front, Joao Tabino in second, Evandro Dantas there in third, Duda Castro in fourth, and Simon Mayer is going to round out the top 5 in the S1 category. Jason Green with a little bit of a margin, it must be said. However, he may feel comfortable heading through these last few races of the season. Then in S2, it's Paul Jackson, the Brit, at the front at 346 points on the board there. Only 15 points behind is Philip Berry, the Australian, there in second. Pedro Carvalho there from Portugal will be in P number 3. Wilson Brazarosco, the Brazilian, in fourth, and the 444 car in P number 4. And then Russell Tekler is going to round out your top 5. And Charles, you always say this is your favorite class. Let's take a look at the Masters now.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, because I'm one of those guys. I'm at that age. Brad Cathcart, just a 10-point lead, so still very tight at the top over Tom Gradwell, Aussie 1-2. Marcus Burkett, the Welsh Dragon, in third with 326 points, and then Kurt Nunez and Jorg Mani, 320 and 278. So still pretty tight up at the top. Top 5, less than 100 points difference, and as we say, it's about where you finish here, and so it's the way the points are scored. If you finish P2 overall, even if you're first in class, you get P2 overall points, and that's how the points work out. So every position matters during the course of this race.
And there are a lot of places to try and make up a position, not necessarily overtaking opportunities, however, spots where some drivers may run into trouble all throughout this race. We mentioned just a few of them during the Formula Ford broadcast earlier on this afternoon, and I think we'll go through them again following Joao Tobino, currently P3 in this qualifying session. Less than half a second off Panero, who's still at the front, just barely outside of the sub 1 minute 40 section there. So if you can gain about 0.004 of a second, he'll be the first to break into that barrier there. But heading through turn number 7, that is a tricky corner. If you're going single file, let alone side by side, we mentioned that as being a good overtaking opportunity. That is also a great place to get past some drivers if they make a mistake. This is a section that caught out Jorg Mani during that Formula Ford race earlier on. That's turn number 9 and 10. That feels more like one corner before you have to get it woed up quite a lot heading into turn number 11. Then we head into the final 2 real corners here on this track, that being turn 12 and turn 13, that caught out some drivers. Turn 13, you can see no runoff area at all. You run a little bit wide. You have about 4 inches of asphalt outside of that painted white line, and then you have a very hard concrete barrier to greet you if you just miss that apex by about 1.5 foot. And woo, Tobino with a big moment heading through turn number 1 and gets hit by multiple cars heading through that section. Thankfully, they're in the qualifying session, so they won't have to worry too much about that. However, that is something that we'll try not to replicate here in this race coming up, but just saying it may probably happen. What do you think, Charles?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I will say this: there's the areas we indicated. Excuse me, that run down to turn 8 and then the run back up to the start finish line is going to be easier because these cars draft better than the formulas do. So it'll be a lot easier for them to make up some of that time down these straightaways.
Well, that is a big factor as well. Usually with this season, with the races that we visited so far, there are some pretty long straightaways, it must be said, just looking through the tracks we visited so far and the ones we have coming up. Summit Point, that start finish straightaway there at Summit Point is quite disproportionately long compared to the rest of them. Then you go to the Zandvoort right after that. That was another good slipstreaming track with some long flat out blasts, even though there's only one real straightaway on that entire circuit. Then the Nordschleife, I remember watching that finish, having Easter dinner with my family in New Jersey, and that was a very hectic race, it must be said. Then you've got the Nordschleife, as I said, New Hampshire, VIR, Canadian Tire, Rudskogen that we visited last week. Then we've got Belle Isle here this week to kick off the month of May. Phoenix on the road course, that's going to be interesting in a week's time. Then Belle Isle, actually, well, no, we're visiting Belle Isle now. We'll be heading a state over to Mid-Ohio in a couple of weeks' time. Then Winton in Australia and Watkins Glen to round off this season. So this is probably one of the less slipstream dependent racetracks. However, it's still a very challenging one, and we've seen all the drivers pretty much attack that challenge here in this race, and also have a weird bowling session that we saw quite a few moments ago. They're still parked there on the outside of turn number 11, so I don't think they'll be setting a qualifying time. However, Jason Green he's currently in P number 6. This is a pretty interesting qualifying session and very close to here, Charles.
Yeah, absolutely. It's it's coming down to the bitter end here. I don't know that we're going to get any more fast laps. It looks like most of the guys have already entered the pits. So I think it's just a matter of getting everybody off the track and allowing that last lap to be run, and then we can get started with this race.
The checkered flag has been out here in this qualifying session for about 1.25 minutes here. We're following Evandro Dantas heading through this challenging section of the course that has caught out many drivers in real life. The sim is no different. Little runoff area driving by the fountain section there. That's between turn 7. Oh no, you can see the massive puff of smoke there. I thought Evandro Dantas had track. Yeah, that is a barbecue there. That's exactly what that is. I think single-handedly contributing to CO2 and carbon emissions there with that beautiful burnout there. The smell coming off of those tires has to be absolutely wonderful there. But Evandro Dantas coming into the pits. We didn't really mention this during the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors race earlier on this afternoon. Well, it's not the strangest pit entry in the world here at Belle Isle, but it will be one that can catch out some of these drivers if we see some very close quarters action once these drivers come into the pits. Evandro Dantas, he stopped very briefly and he's now back out on track. So these drivers using all the time at their hands to get just a little bit more seat time before we get things really kicked off here in just a few moments' time.
Yeah, I don't think it's a difficult. Obviously, it's not a very difficult entry, but because we don't run this track a lot, may catch some drivers out on where the pit speed limit cones are. So it'll be something we'll have to watch out. And of course, the pit exit, as we just switched over to the race and the fog has settled in. The pit exit is going to be one to watch if there's any side by side battles. You're coming out right in the middle of turn 2.
This may not even be the fog. I think it's just from the tire smoke from that driver doing the donuts in the turn 11 runoff area. But here's the starting grid. It's going to be Marco Pinheiro starting this race from the pole. Didn't quite break past a 1:40 barrier there. He'll be starting alongside the Brazilian of Evandro Dantas in second, Joao Tabino in third, Christian Cabanca in fourth, who dominated the Formula Fords earlier on this afternoon. Then Yanchi Lin in fifth, Jason Green in sixth, Bobby West in seventh, Simon Mayer in P number 8, Jeff Frister in ninth, and Chris Murakami is going to round at your top 10.
Yeah, starting in 11th, it's Alan McCain. Philip Berry is our top Spec 2 driver in 12th. Hugh Simpkins is in 13th. Scott Russell, 14th. Our buddy Josh Wilkie in 15th. Andrea Favini in 16th. Pedro Carvalho in 17th. Tom Gradwell, Masters driver, in 18th. Joseph Tarantino and Alan Bradshaw round out row 10. Andrew Love is in 21st. Jesus Rodriguez in 22nd. Jim Brewster, 23rd. Paulo Brim in 24th. We roll on. Wilson Bruzarosco in 25th. Brad Cathcart, 26th. Curtin Nunez in 27th. Jeff Jacobson in 28th. Michelle Viglini in 29th, the last driver to set a time. And so the rest of them line up by iRating. Maurizio Naselli is going to start 30th. York Monty in 31st. Jason Perry in 32nd. Trenton Kramer in 33rd. Mike Taylor in 34th. And rounding out your 35-car field is Russ Telker.
You always love to see a massive field of Spec Racer Ford race cars here from the Weekend Warriors Series week in and week out. It puts on some fantastic shows as well. And to put on the fantastic shows that we have week in and week out, you need to have some fantastic sponsors. And we have that for the second half here. The second half of this series here, that being Personal Wealth Solutions. Just like in racing, financial planning and investments require a team behind and experience as well. Personal Wealth Solutions creates custom investments and financial planning strategies for select individuals and businesses with over 25 years of experience. Their goal is not to have you feel like a number, but have you feel like they're number one. If you'd like to learn more about financial planning run by racers serving racers, head on over to www.personalwealthsolutions.com. We'd like to thank Personal Wealth Solutions for their sponsorship here of this series. We couldn't do it without them. We couldn't have this great race that we're having right now. Marco Pinheiro leading them to green. The drivers are on their way into turn number 1. Pinheiro is going to lead them comfortably heading through this tricky section here. Those drivers beating and banging, eating the curbs like cereal for breakfast there as we negotiate the fog and the drivers negotiate turn number 2. That crest going over that corner is a real pain in the ass if you're one of these drivers that's called out drivers in real life, including the pace car drivers for some certain IndyCar races, and may catch some drivers out here in the sim. But they're single filing out throughout the vast majority of the field. Is Jeff Frister, who's battling hard there. He's going side by side into turn number 3, and now single files out through turn number 4. That was Bobby West that he was going side by side with. So far these drivers taking it fairly easy. I mentioned during the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors broadcast earlier on this afternoon that I wasn't expecting a pileup to happen there. However, in these Spec Racer Ford race cars that are a little bit bigger with a lot more drivers in the field and a very close field to contend with, we may see that happen, and we're seeing it happen right now. That is 3 cars into the barrier on the outside of turn number 6. Jeff Jacobson in the midst of that. I believe that's Nazelli involved as well. So our main story that we always love to follow, actually getting a lot of bump time there from Jeff Jacobson, trying to desperately get that thing turned around using the NASCAR modified configuration there. And that's York Monty with a big hit on the outside of turn number 7. That is going to wound that Spec Racer Ford race car quite badly, and even more contact right behind them. That's Michelle Viglini, who got a big help there, sent them around there in the number 319 car. So right as I was saying that this start was surprisingly clean, we see about 4 incidents in the span of about 30 seconds there, Charles.
Yeah. So, yeah, obviously the first one was a 3-car incident in Naselli that we talked about that earlier. If he was going to be able to get through the field cleanly, not so much this time. Jacobson is already in the pit. Viglini's already towed to the pits as well. Looks like Kramer's okay. Just got slowed down. I think he was behind that Naselli Jeff Jacobson incident. It was just kind of got caught up and held up, but I was able to get through cleanly. And I say that, and he's coming into the pits now, so maybe not as cleanly as I thought.
So this race is officially underway, but these gyros are still not giving any quarters out on the racetrack. That's Brad Cathcart, who is nearly going side by side with Brema, heading through turn number 3. They single file out, heading through that quick succession there of double right-handers with pretty much no runoff area to speak of. Turn number 3 is one of the only corners on this entire track that has runoff area, and yet again, heading through turn number 6, we have another Shamazel. This time, our producer Josh Wilkie involved in that. He's currently running in P22. I think he may have just been caught up there and caught out by a spinning car right in front of him. Favini right in front of those drivers that went off the track. He's currently running P14, battling hard with Russell there, who's currently in 13th in the number 22 car. So we still have a lot of drivers very close together right now. I think it's a massive train, you could say, between Russell, who's currently in P13, running all the way outside the top 25, those drivers covered by less than 6 seconds. So it's a massive train of Spec Racer Ford cars that we have in this race, despite the chaos we've already had.
Yeah, it's Paneros did a good job just getting out front and getting away from Dantas a little bit. Dantas still in that area where he might can close that gap up with the draft. Tabino right on his tail. But yeah, there's a big group of cars there, starting with it's like McCain all the way down. I mean, basically just 20 cars behind him. So it's just a train, and we'll see that as people start making more mistakes, as we see who's that? Yanchi Lin trying to work his way through, and Christian Kabanka as well, making his way around Lin. As we see themselves sort each other out, then they'll start stretching those gaps out a little bit more.
I think these drivers are getting into a groove now. They're getting to the point of this race where we're like, okay, we can start to battle a little bit less now. We're approaching this stage of the race where these drivers should probably focus a bit more on fuel saving and probably focus a bit on reeling in our pole sitter and current leader of the race, that being Marco Panero, who stretched his legs out to a 1.5 second advantage over Joao Tabino there in P number 2. We mentioned it before he grabbed the green, and I'll say it again here for posperity's sakes. Belle Isle is a track where slipstreaming really isn't the name of the game. It's a much more driver skill-oriented racetrack, and we're seeing the creme de la creme rise, so to speak, to invoke a little bit of French here on this broadcast. And Panero is slowly driving away. I wonder, actually, Joao Tabino as well is pulling away from Dantas right behind. So this is a little bit surprising. It's a departure from what we usually see here in this series. As for darn sure, usually we see the front 5 covered by barely any air, then they start to spread out once the pit stops come. But right now we're seeing the front already start to spread out here, Charles.
Yeah, a little bit, but I'm looking at Kabanka making that pass on Lynn. Kabanka was really, really fast. Just pulled a massive gap in the Formula Ford race. So I think he's got this track figured out. So if he can get through cleanly around Dantas, maybe he can track those front 2 down.
Just have to wait and see what happens between now and the checkered flag. There's a hard fight between Kabanka and Dantas. Kabanka trying to get the move done down the inside. Heading into turn number 3, pulls off a fairly textbook move there, heading through one of the best overtaking opportunities if you're one of these Spec Racer Ford drivers. Those two are battling very hard for that final podium position, but Yanchi Lin is not out of it either. All these drivers, you can cover them all with a pretty oversized blanket, it must be said, but you can cover them with one blanket. Nevertheless, probably that advertising banner of Visit Michigan as they come out of turn number 6 would probably cover most of these drivers, and they're going side by side now. That's Dantas and Lin side by side, careening their way into turn number 7. One of these drivers may have to back out. Neither of them do. Actually, Yanchi Lin pulls in behind there, concedes on trying to challenge Dantas there to move into P number 4. Jeff Richter in the middle of that. He's currently right behind Jason Green. He's atop of the Masters as things stand at the moment. He's one of the tail cars of this fight that we have currently, this train of cars that we have right now. That's Andre Favini, the driver from Sweden, around it in the midsection here of this racetrack. Little room, so this is going to, this is torturous. Favini stopped for what feels like 1,000 years and clips a barrier there too. Thankfully, I don't think he picked up anything more than a paint chip there for Favini. That stings when you're stopped on the side of the track. And whenever you're in a position like that, it feels like you're stuck there for 1,000 years.
Yeah, but it was a smart move to just wait. Yeah, he lost 20 positions as those cars just came steaming through. But smart to just do that and not pull out and try and correct your line in the middle of that and potentially take out half the field. So well done by Favini in that situation there, as we see Rodriguez and Gradwell battling coming down the front straight, I believe. Is that right? Or is that coming into turn 3? Yeah, maybe coming
into three
there.
now, and Carvalho noses it, and we have a
no.
pile up here. That is Carvalho involved, as is Tom Gradwell there. And who is that? That's the twitching 76 there of Rodriguez involved, and it's going to create a whole sort of schmozzle here with the oncoming train of Spec Racer Fords. I did not have a good feeling about that as soon as I saw Carvalho head his way into turn number 3, going about 20 miles an hour quicker than you'd usually expect heading into a corner like that. And yeah, that's kind of expected there at a track like that, which is very narrow, a section of the track like that, which is very narrow, very easy to make a mistake. That was strange too. It looked like Carvalho's car was made out of rubber the way he bounced back onto track. But our first pileup has already come out here.
Yeah, you just like you said, too much speed going into 3. Just the inside line, you've got to just really try and check the car up and just carry too much speed through, hit the tire barrier on the outside, bounce back into the racing line, and took out a couple more cars with them.
I don't think that'll be the last incident of its kind, though. We got a nice graphic here to see who the hard chargers are through this field. York Money in P19 is one of them, currently up 12 spots from where he started. A nice run there from the driver that did not set a time here in this qualifying session. That was pretty big contact right behind. I believe that was Gradwell hitting the wall coming out of turn number 12 there. He was getting all the corners messed up here. It feels like every single corner is endless here, especially with the fog as well. It's like being in the, I'm trying to think of the other. It's like being at a hill climb right at the top of the hill on a very early morning. It's just so foggy and all that stuff. You can't really see anything more than like 500 feet away from you. Christian Kabanka is seeing a chance at a podium here. He's currently running in P number 4, and Yanchi Lin has gone by himself and Dantas to move into P3. So nicely played there from the driver of the number 30 car. We didn't get a good view to see what happened there. We may try and take a look at a replay to see what Yanchi Lin may have done to move his way into the podium position. Yanchi is always an incredibly fast driver, and I think he's putting that on full display here.
Yeah, absolutely. Kabanka had gotten through past Dantas to take over that final podium spot. Lynn was behind and somehow managed to jump both of them. So I'm wondering if maybe there was some advantage gained by maybe Dantas and Kabanka maybe fighting over a corner and allowed Lynn to slip through. And here comes the replay now, so we'll find out exactly how it happened. So it already got through past Dantas, so it's Kabanka in third, and Lynn just gets the draft down the straight, coming into turn 3, and just a nice easy turn, and yeah, well done. That was a nice easy pass. Just used the slipstream to his advantage and took that spot.
Nicely played there, must be said, from Yanchi Lin. We'll see if he can hold off on that spot, and we'll see if he can roll in Panero and Joao Tabino, which have pulled away. Currently, Yanchi Lin is 5.5 seconds, I should say, back of our leader, Marco Panero. So we may see him try and reel them in, but I think with how far Joao Tabino is farther up the road, he may not be able to get any sort of slipstream off the car way farther up the road. Ooh, as we have Joseph Tarantino around with a blown motor. He's getting a smoke show right now. I think that was an off heading through turns 1 and 2, and you can still see him smoke screening the field as he's stopped there in the pits, had to tow back. Not the first driver to get called out by this track so far in this race. I don't think he will be the last of the currently we only have 22 drivers still left out on track right now, not involved in any sort of major incident, albeit the drivers that are inside the top 22 have been involved in minor incidents. A lot of drivers getting bit by the bullet here at Belle Isle, and I think it's kind of the complete opposite of what we saw in the Formula Fords earlier. Yep. Jason Perry, right as I was saying that drivers were getting bit, Jason Perry gets bit heading through turn number 6.
Yeah, I just caught the end of it, but he just kind of nosed in, as we said, with that Summer Mayor also. Sideways. Trying to see where that is. Is that around the turn 9, turn 10? Yeah. So in that little, I guess, swimming pool section there, very difficult set of corners. It's really more of a, throttle control type corners where you're just trying to, feather the throttle and keep your speed. Without having to touch the brakes and just carry your momentum through there. And so not quite achieved perfection. So he's dropped a few seconds and a few positions down to 14th, and now is coming into the pits for his stop.
Ooh, an early call to come down pit road for the driver. The number 5 car, Christian Gabanka, has now got a move done to move ahead of Yan Lin to move back into the podium positions. But Simon Mayer with an early pit stop. We've seen him go for some off-the-wall strategies in the past. I'm trying to bring my mind back to Canadian Tire Motorsports Park not very long ago. Came into the pits very, very late there and ended up taking the checkered flag, the top of the drivers in that race. And Simon Mayer, there's a replay of what caused him to spin. It's a self-inflicted spin there. If I could spit my words out here, it sounded like a helicopter there. That was a very strange sound that I made. But Simon Mayer with a self-inflicted spin heading through turn number 8. Try and say that 5 times fast. That's such a tricky section too, because the bumps are put on full display. You're going fairly slow, but also you're chucking it around the racetrack with little margin for error if you do go off.
Yeah, it's one of those. It's kind of weird. And when I watched the replay, it kind of reminded me of the last time I drove here, because I did the same thing. Is he came through 8 clean, but that first left-hander, turn 9, there's a bump right in the racing line at the apex, and if you catch it wrong with too much, as we see that Jorg Monty and Jim Brewster touching there, coming through that same section, if you get too far on the inside, that bump will unsettle the car, and I think he just had too much steering in when he hit the bump and just lost the rear. It happens quite a bit there in that section of track.
I think that turn 8 is probably one of the hardest corners here on this racetrack. It's not flamboyantly difficult, however, it's a sneaky challenge heading through that section, because you don't have a straight approach to it at all. You have that small little concrete barrier sticking out there, taking a big chunk of the racing line, and then you have to go through a bumpy medium speed corner where you have probably about 6 inches of runoff area if you run a little bit wide. That is tough. Heading through turn number 8, I'm shocked we didn't see as many drivers get caught out by that corner as we were expecting in the Formula Fords earlier on this afternoon. But here with the Spec Racer Fords, it's been an interesting race so far. A lot of drivers getting bit by the bullet here at Belle Isle, and as things stand currently, the top 15 are separated by well over 30 seconds, with a top 2 split by 2.8. So we're seeing an unusual style of racing that we usually see here from the Spec Racer 4s. We're seeing drivers spread out a little bit more, trying to manage mistakes, and I think probably at this stage also managing their fuel a little bit. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there might be a little bit of fuel saving going on. These guys right here are just, it just seems like they're just swapping that lead of that pack every other lap. I'm just looking, Jorg Monty is a man on a mission. He's up 17 positions, running in 14th. He's in the group now. He's ahead of that group that had Bradshaw, Brewster, Gradwell, and Nunez. So he's passed all those Masters class drivers, and now making his way up to see if he can get to Bruce Roscoe, as these guys are still running through here. And Fritcher obviously got a pretty sizable advantage at this point in the Masters class. Murakami's about 4 seconds off of his pace, and so he's got some work to do to try and catch that up.
A lot of these drivers just barely outside the top 10 are pretty much running in no man's land. Chris Murakami there currently in P number 9. That was, I wouldn't say it was sad looking at him running pretty much all by himself, but at a track like this, which is less than 2.5 miles long, I think the correct length is 2.35 miles. It's not the longest track in the world. However, there's a decent enough space here at this track, and the field is spread out enough whereby you'd expect to see some sort of cars around him. However, Chris Murakami just running in his own, he's running his own zip code right now, currently in P number 9 as things stand at the moment. Jim Brewster going side by side here, heading into turn, well, he was going side by side, heading into turn number 3. That was himself and Bradshaw battling hard right now. These two fairly close by each other. However, they're fighting for P4 and P5 respectively. In the Masters categories, Jorg Monty, who's currently running P13, cutting his way through the field like a hot knife through butter. He is again, effectively in no man's land when it comes to the Masters category. Murakami is well farther up the road, and he has a pretty decent gap between himself and Brewster and Bradshaw right behind. So I think Jorg Monty may be eyeing up a top 10 overall here. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's definitely got the pace in the car. So far, he's been showing is looking really strong. The field's thinning out, so you can't really use the draft to help him work his way up the field. So it's going to be about his pace by himself. Once he gets clear of Bruiser Roscoe, he's got a 10-second gap up to Barry to get him one more position. I have seen some cars coming into the pit, so McCain, Simpkins, Mayer have all came in, taking their pit stop a little early, so maybe they're thinking an undercut's a good call on their part, and so we'll see as we see McCain up on the curb there. Yeah, I think that's in 4 and 5. So it looks like that's where that is, or is that?
That was heading through
Uh,
9 and 10 there.
9 and
So
10.
that's
Okay, so same little issue there that we had with earlier. So yeah, such a tough section of track as he's working his way now, trying to get to the through 12 and 13 to get back onto the front straight and see if he can use the car in front to help propel him forward.
think of the 2.35 miles of length here at this track. Probably 2.2 miles of it, you're fighting something, regardless of what kind of race car you're driving around here. The spec racer Fords are no different. We've seen a lot of drivers get caught out by that. Could be the reason why we're having some very early takers here in the pits. Actually, I say that we are approaching the halfway mark. I'm honestly shocked we're already 18 minutes into this 40-minute affair here. So we may see a trickle start to come down pit road. I gotta wonder if these drivers in the top 5 are going to try and do something different, because Pinero at this point, he is entirely checked out. He has a 3.5 second gap to Tabino, who has about a 5-second gap to himself and Lynn there. So Pinero and Tabino are running effectively, and well, they're running all by themselves right now, driving off into the sunset that you can't see because of how foggy it is. So I wonder if the drivers right behind them may try and go for an off-the-wall and different strategy, just to try and break the stranglehold that the two leading this race have over this race right now.
I mean, yeah, at some point you have to give an alternate strategy a try, just to see if you can make it work. Yeah, when these guys could dip in, come back out behind some decently quick cars and just use the draft that they're going to get down those two straightaways, the only draft they're going to get for the most part, and see if they can just use it to set some really quick laps. Otherwise, I think the guys out front, with Panera with a 4-second lead, Tabino another 4 seconds back to Lynn. I think these guys are just saying, you know what, we're going to run until the fuel's out. We'll come in, take our pit stop, and then we'll go back out and finish the race. I don't think they're looking to see if there's some kind of special strategy they need to run, because the strategy they're using is working quite well.
Yeah, there's a lot of drivers that are usually set in their ways when it comes to strategies, which is usually why when it comes to like a 3-car pack that we see with Evandro Dantes, Christian Kabanka, and Yanshi Lin, usually we'll see one of them just stay out way longer than the rest of them, even though the other two have come into the pits about 10 laps before, and there's a big crash here. Juice Simpkins involved along with, that is Michelle Voglini, so rubbing salt into the wounds of the driver of the 319 car who we saw go for a spin not very long ago. There's a replay here, and Simpkins goes for the dive heading into turn number 3, runs a little bit wide, and Voglini actually, I think Voglini may have cut across Simpkins' nose there coming out of turn number 4. I think that's what may have caused that heading through 3.
That is kind of the way it looked. I had to see a couple more replays, but yeah, I think that just at first blush, that's the way it looked to me. Just two guys fighting over the same position on the track, and it didn't work out for either one of them.
It is a shame to have an accident like that happen pretty much right at the halfway mark of this race. Not ideal for either of those drivers who have not had an ideal race in their own regard. Jeff Fisher is having a pretty good race, though. He's currently P7, top of the Masters drivers right now, and I think he may be sizing up a way to pass Jason Green right in front of him, because I saw Green get very flirtatious with that barrier on the outside of turn number 4 here. So I think Fisher is definitely applying the pressure on the driver of the number 160 car, who finished on the podium earlier on in the Formula 4s and is leading the championship in S1 right now. So I think Jason Green may be feeling under pressure here at this stage.
Yeah, it kind of looks that way. Fritcher's having quite a good run. He had some really good races at the start of the season, kind of tailed off a little bit here in the past few weeks, but today looks like he's the class of the class of the Masters group, and now is putting pressure on those front 6. The back of those front 6 Spec 1 drivers.
I think I'm trying to take a look at our live timing screen. Lap traffic is going to play a role before the drivers at the front of the field come into the pits. Maybe that could be a contributing factor for them coming down pit road. This is Marco Panera, and as you can see from the track map graphic that we have, it's not a very long ways until he negotiates some lap traffic, and then after he gets past the driver currently running in P number 26, that being Brad Cathcart, he will have a pretty good window of opportunity to try and make up some time. He has some time to lose, though. He has a 5-second gap between himself and Tabino there for the lead of this race. So Marco Panero just driving off into the sunset again that he cannot see because of the fog that we have here right now. So Panero feeling very comfortable at this stage. However, we could see him get dragged into the pits just a teeny tiny bit early because of that traffic.
It is very possible. I mean, it's like I said, you can either just, one of two ways. You can either fight through it, or you can just pit and save yourself the trouble. But then, the pitting is, you fall back into another set of traffic. So, when you've got the fastest car on the track, and it's, kind of showing right now, it's really not much of it's kind of a no-win situation. But I think I would look at what we've got in front and say, hey, if it's just a single car here and there, I think I'd rather do that than try and maybe work through a group of 4 or 5 that have been fighting for the last 5 or 6 laps.
We'll just have to wait and see what some of these drivers opt to do. We're over the halfway mark now, 23 and a half minutes on the board right now. And there's still a lot left to be decided. However, the class battles aren't really that hot, if I'm being brutally honest. Panero leading by about 6 seconds. Frister right now is leading and Masters by about 7. And Philip Berry, who we haven't really talked about, is currently leading in the S2 category. There's a battle right now between Brewster and Brazarosco here, as I think he got the move done well before they even thought of getting on the brakes heading into turn number 7 right now. So Brewster running in P14. And now the lap traffic playing a role for Marco Panero. Brad Cathcart playing the sportsman, taking the outside line there, heading through turn number 3, and lets him go without too much of a struggle. That's a pretty damaged race car there, Brad Cathcart. Looks it looks like if you got a clay model of a Spec Racer Ford and kind of just threw it at a wall, that's basically what it looks like. A pitched off front end and quite wrinkled right now. So I think Brad Cathcart not having the best show here this afternoon. However, he has I think he'll take the award in our heart for the most interesting looking race car currently on track.
Yeah, I think he's done a good job just keep it on track. Yeah, didn't fight Panero as he worked his way through. Now Panero's got a nice 13 or so second gap up to the next lap car. As far as I can tell, I can't see any other cars out there around him. So it could be nice and quiet for him. He won't have anything to worry about, I don't think, as in the way of lap traffic in front. So he could just focus on getting ready to have his pit stop.
And we're taking a look now of the fight for the final podium position. Yanqi Lin is still holding that spot right now, and he hasn't made the ingress that we thought he was going to do on Panero and Tabino farther up the road. So he's actually backing up a teeny tiny bit. It must be said, this fight, which was at one point a 6-car train, had broken into more of a 3-and-3 kind of fight. However, as things stand at the moment, I think it's a 5-car train with Bobby West farther behind acting as the rear gunner right now. So Yanqi Lin's still leading them. He's currently running in the last podium position. Then Kabanka behind Dantes and P number 5. And you've got Green and Frister kind of making up the tail end of this train. And ooh, Green Gang very close to that outside wall of turn number 2 there. I think I feel bad for the crews that had to service this track in real life and had to put up the advertising banners coming around this racetrack, because they probably had to do it after every single day of racing action whenever the Detroit Grand Prix came around. I'm looking at Joao Tabino's race car, and are my eyes deceiving me, or is there a little bit of left side damage there on Joao Tabino's race car? It looks, ooh, yeah, a little bit of scuffing there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. It looks like he's definitely had a little contact with something during the course of the race, which just goes to show he's done how well the job he's done with a little bit of damage. I don't think it's really affecting his lap times very much. As we said, just ran his fastest lap of the race is a 140.7. So it was about 0.3 faster than Panero up in front. But it looks like that gap is starting to come down a little bit between Tabino and Lin. So I think that group is starting to make inroads. So we'll see what happens if they can get through there. And that might have been just a side effect of Tabino having to work through the lap traffic as well. As you see the 336 car right there still behind him, Pedro Carvalho. So it's we'll see if this group can continue to make up that stagger.
I'm curious as to whether or not these drivers are going to come into
Bino's
the
in.
pits soon like Joel Tabino has. So the driver that's running in P2 throughout a vast majority of this race has come in at the end of lap 16. Joel Tabino, one of the first drivers, if not the very first driver running inside the top 10 to take that dive down pit lane. We'll see that damage go away. I don't think it was any sort of damage that was affecting him going down some of the straightaways that we have here as Joel Tabino drives through a car and their motor immediately blows up, so that's not ideal for whoever's car that was. Christian Gabanka currently running in P number 3 now after we saw the second place runner of Tabino come into the pit lane. So Tabino going to exit out. I think he is going to be right outside the top 10. Yeah, you can see Barry is going to get right by him there. Barry still leading quite comfortably in the S2 category, but Joel Tabino coming in for a somewhat early stop here compared to all of his competitors. The first one to come down pit road. However, we may see some responding here in the not too distant future. If you were Marco Pinero, Charles, would you come into the pit just to respond to the driver that was way behind you?
I don't necessarily think so, because I think he had the measure of them before. So it's not like, I think, it's not like other series where you can come in and get some fresh tires, and the next thing you know, you're 2 seconds a lap faster. I think that he'll still be running comparable pace to the pace he had before. Although eagle-eyed producer Samuli did say that Joel lost a second and a half in the first sector that last lap coming in. So definitely the impact that he had, maybe it was on that lap traffic, slowed him down significantly, and he just felt like he needed to come in and get the car repaired as we see Pinero coming into the pits.
Leader of the race ever since the green flag fell not very long ago has now come into the pits, is giving it to Yanxi Lin, who I don't think crossed the start-finish line in the lead of the race there, but I think unless he responds as well, he will be leading a lap. We saw in the Formula Fords earlier on this afternoon here at this very same track, with a bit less fog in that race, we saw only 2 lap leaders, that being Chris Murakami and our eventual winner, that being Christian Gabanka. We may see a repeat of that here, albeit the Spec Racer Ford strategies are usually a little bit more varied, so we may see some more lap leaders than just 2. Yanxi Lin now negotiating lap traffic here. Brad Cathcart farther up the road, and who is that? I believe that's a number 336, I believe, that he is negotiating coming onto the start-finish straightaway, that being Pedro Carvalho, who's currently running in P27, one of the last cars left on track. Still only 29 cars on track right now, so the attrition that we were expecting here in this race is definitely coming in spades as Yanxi Lin gets past that lap traffic and is now trying to build that gap between himself and Christian Gabanka.
Yeah, lap traffic is going to act as a wedge, just going to slow these guys down in one of the slowest parts of the track. So they're going to have to kind of wait until they get a good spot they can make that pass. So it's going to give Lin a chance to check out just a little bit, and we'll see if those guys behind can respond. We see, I think Carvalho's trying to get out of the way, and I don't think that Gabanka was expecting it, and so he is now fighting with Dantas. Yeah, and so that's going to make it even worse because they start fighting through corners. That's just going to give Gabanka a chance to just check, or Lin a chance to just check out. Sorry about that.
It's quite all right, Charles. I got flustered by the drivers coming down pit lane. That was Jason Green, Frister, and West. So the drivers that were making up the tail 3 of that battle throughout a vast majority of this first 30 minutes here of this race have come into the pits at roughly the same time. Russell as well coming down pit lane. So we'll see how they exit out. Frister and Green exiting. I think that actually, no, West actually lost out on a spot. Actually, no, I think they exited out fairly as they were before, with Green actually building a gap between himself and the drivers right behind. Joel Tabino got hurt by that. That is why in the world is Joel Tabino all of a sudden way farther back? He lost time before he came into the pits. However, this is a huge time loss for the driver that had about a 5-second gap between himself and Yanxi Lin before he came into the pits. Now it's gonna be an uphill climb for him to just finish inside the top 5 here, Charles.
Yeah, well, here's what happened. So the 3 cars that came into the pits the last lap, Green, Green and Fritcher and West, were behind Dantas as he was making his way through around, as Gabanka was making his way around the lap traffic. And so a couple of cars got through. The other ones that didn't pitted to avoid having to fight through the lap traffic. So they got a free pit entry clear, and the other cars had to work through the lap traffic, and that's where they made up some of that time.
Now the front three have come in. Yanchi Lin, Christian Kabanka, and Evandro Dantas are now trundling their way down pit lane right now. Who is going to exit out in front? Will Yanchi Lin hold on to that lead? Will Christian Kabanka get jumped by Evandro Dantas? Those two covered by barely any airs and now come into their pit box. This is going to give the lead back to Panero with about 7.5 minutes left to go here. So he is just going to be driving off into the sunset in the number 16 car. Yanchi Lin exiting out. He's already away, and in P number 2, Tabino is nowhere near him, so Yanchi Lin fairly comfortably exits out in P number 2. Jason Green jumping up to P number 3, so Dantas having a very slow stop there, as did Kabanka. He's exited out in P number 8 there, so the drivers that were running in P2 and P3 when they came in not very long ago are now running. Oh, that is why in the world is Christian Kabanka back down to P number 8? That is a disastrous turn of fortune there for the driver of the number 78 car.
Yeah, I was just sitting here looking at he was actually through the pit lane. He was about 3 seconds slower than West. He was about 1.5 seconds slower than Fritcher. Tabino had a very, very slow lap. And he was about 4 seconds slower than Dantas and Green and Yangshi Lin. So he took a little extra fuel, but it was just pit entry and pit exit that cost him.
This is a very strange way that things have turned out here in this race, as must be said. We were mentioning how lap traffic was going to play a huge role here in this race, and just general traffic, period, for drivers attempting some different strategies, again, caught up in some Spec Racer Ford Hornet's nest. However, we weren't really expecting a driver in contention for a podium position to drop down to P number 8 and Joao Tabino to really struggle. I thought it was a kick in the shins that Joao Tabino, who was running in second throughout the vast majority of this race, dropped down and is now running in P number 5, and then Kabanka comes in. That is a disastrous turn of fortune for him. As sorry, I had to take a quick little break there. I have a mop on my head for folks who want a good image of what my hair looks like, and that was not a good turn of things for me here in the broadcast booth, but never mind. We'll talk about this race with about 5.5 minutes left to go here. Jeff Frister putting on a fantastic show in the Masters category, still leading them right now, with Chris Murakami quite a long ways back in P number 2 in that class. Philip Berry, the Australian in the 888 car, he's running a P14 and is on his way to a dominant win in the Spec 2 category. But Frister, I think we mentioned it earlier on in this broadcast, and I'll mention it again. He has been a standout star from this race, has really not folded under any sort of pressure. However, he may lose out on a spot here with Bobby West and Christian Kabanka right behind, who I can imagine are feeling quite racy as well.
Yeah, it definitely looks that way. Yeah, it's a nice little group there, Fritcher, West, and Kabanka. There's just about 2 seconds behind Tabino, who is trying to catch up to Green and Dantas, who are now battling for that final podium position. Dantas taking it over for the time being. So yeah, Fritcher's going to have his work cut out for him to try and keep those 2 cars behind him.
There is still so much left to be decided here, and so much stuff that can happen, as nearly, I think that was some drivers getting very flirtatious with that wall coming out of turn number 8. That would have been a big twist if we saw a driver running inside the top 8 crash in the other final few laps here of this race. Currently, we're coming up to the final 4 minutes here of this 40-minute affair. Bobby West is actually dropping back a teeny tiny bit of Frister here. He is going to be at risk of losing a position to Christian Kabanka here in the not-too-distant future. I think Kabanka at this stage is running. He's definitely seeing the red mist right now. He is not happy with how things have shaken out for him. So I think Christian Kabanka may be trying to push the envelope and feeling quite racy between now and the end of this driver, the number 78 car. Things not going to plan here in the final 10 minutes of this 40-minute race, but Christian Kabanka still has a decent shot to break into the top 6 if he's very lucky between now and the end of this.
Yeah, I think West maybe just kind of a little bit gun shy. I think if you see the guy in front of you just kind of bounce it off the wall, you hesitate just a little bit, maybe give a little more room than you necessarily have to, as we see a little like more concrete dust come up in the air. And
maybe that's the reason why we had so much fog, which has now gone away in the later stages of this race. Still looks a little bit hazy, but the fog is mostly disappeared. Maybe the fog was just a tire smoke that we saw from the drivers doing burnouts. There we go.
Yep.
It'll get out eventually. Maybe it could also be from the concrete dust of people hitting these barriers. That was, I never forgot the word burnout before on a broadcast. I can add that to the list of things that have had happen here on Apex Racing TV in my roughly, well, over a year now working here. We are approaching the final stages here of this race. I think we are on 2 to go. I'm trying to do the maths in my head real quick right now. 2.5 minutes left, so I think we are on 2 to go here, Charles.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think I swallowed some of that concrete dust. I've had to mute myself a couple of times just from coughing as my throat's drying out after the 2 broadcasts and being up for now 13 hours due to team stuff this morning at 3 a.m. That was lovely. But yeah, Fritcher's still doing a good job of holding on that position, P6. West is dropping back a little bit. Kabanka is probably smelling blood is in the water here and is looking for this move down to the inside. Let's see if he's going to try it. He is. And just down into turn 3, late on the brakes. And nicely done. He will make that pass around West to take over P7. And so now he's going to put Fritcher in his sights to see if he can get him on the next lap.
I have a good feeling about Christian Kabanka in this fight. He is running very aggressively right now. Again, not happy with how things shaked out for him. He is looking for some sort of redemption, and he may be able to find it if he gets past Frister here in the not too distant future. Checkered flag will be coming out in about a lap and a half time, so these drivers are starting to push the envelope. This is a fight between Green and Dantas side by side heading into turn number 8. Green, that's got to be close to the outside wall. He hits it there. So Jason Green, who's running, trying to make his way into the podium positions, runs wide heading through turn number 7. I did not have a good feeling about that when they went into the braking zone of that corner. It looked like Jason Green was overcooking it a teeny tiny bit around the outside of turn number 7, which is tricky enough, just single file. That would have been bold and audacious stuff if he got that move done. It would have been our highlight of the week really here on Apex Racing TV, but just wasn't able to get it done and is going to have a rough ride between now and the end of this. Marco Pinero, meanwhile, he has not had a rough ride, as has Evandro Dantas. He's had a somewhat smooth race here. He hasn't seen too many incidents. Really, I think that Green hitting the wall when he was trying to get the move done around the outside of him may have been Evandro Dantas' most sketchy moment all throughout this race. He's put together a fairly clean show here in a race where many drivers have run into some difficulties. So I think just, again, making it to the checkered flag with a clean race car is an absolute achievement, and we're seeing some drivers do it and others not, so to speak.
Yeah.
Chris Murakami, very clean race car as well, and a very clean race for himself. It looks like he's on track to finish P2 in the Masters category as Christian Kabanka loses it coming out of turn number 3 that he lost it coming out of. I think he briefly got the move done there on Frister. I saw him dropping back, and then I saw Kabanka go off the circuit. So Christian Kabanka, who was running in P8 when they came out of the pits, moves briefly up to P number 7 and is now back into P number 8 after just barely getting it wrong on a move there on Frister. In the later stages here of this race, we are on the white flag lap now, so this may be the last overtaking opportunity if you're Christian Kabanka. Does he push the issue? No, he does not, heading into turn number 7. I think he's seeing the bigger picture, saying like, hey, P number 8, it's not what I wanted, however, it's better than DNF from this race. Seen a lot of drivers run into difficulties, a lot of drivers run into walls, and a lot of drivers run into each other, but I think in a few moments time, Marco Pinero is going to run into the checkered flag to win here at Belle Isle in dominating fashion. It's a story of dominance here in Detroit, and Marco Pinero wins it here in the Spec Racer Fords right behind Yanxi Lin. With a great drive from him, he's going to end up in P2, pretty good as well, making up multiple spots between the start and the finish. Evandro Dantas, who lost one spot from where he started on the front row, is going to end up in P number 3. Just waiting for some more drivers to cross the line there. Kabanka ends up in P number 8. And I'll tell you what, Charles, we were expecting some drama and some attrition from this race. We certainly got that. However, we also got some very compelling and interesting strategy from it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was a really good race, and we did have some attrition, which is always going to happen here at Belle Isle. You're going to get cars that just, for whatever reason, car drivers that make mistakes, end up putting in the wall, damaging their car beyond repair. But yeah, some good battles on track, especially up in the top 10. Obviously Panero had the field covered, but basically from two through 8, I mean, it was seesaw battle from start to finish.
I'm honestly shocked that we saw so much hard battling from this race at track where there's only real 2 overtaking opportunities. I think the chaos and shamazos that we saw throughout it may have been the reason why we saw a whole lot of field shuffling. That's Jim Brewster, who's going to end up in P5 in the Masters category. Philip Berry ended up taking the checkered flag, the top of the S2 drivers. Pedro Carvalho is going to finish quite a long ways back, 10 spots behind your S2 winner, that being Philip Berry. I think he's actually running out of gas as well, very slow coming across the line, but he did make it. So Pedro Carvalho there in the 336 car ends up taking the checkered flag in P24. One of the last cars to actually take the checkered flag both on the lead lap and take the checkered flag without being retired from this race. Michel Voglini, currently in P29, is behind Rodriguez, who I think had some sort of off in the late stages of that race, is being marked as out of it despite being ahead of Voglini, who is still at their on track, who is very, very slow heading into 3. I think they may be running out of fuel here. So Michel Voglini in P29. I think we may have to read out some kind of tribute there. That was a very hard impact, and I think my spine just broke in half watching that.
Wow.
I do not have anything to say about that, Charles.
Yeah, I didn't see who that was, and I don't think it matters. I think Voglini just ran out of fuel, but did not quite get to the checkered flag. But the tow will get him back, and he'll finish in P29. So he was a couple of laps off of the lead lap, so he'll get his spot, and we'll see our final results.
I think Michel Voglini is going to want the prize money from finishing in P20 wherever it was, because I think they may need to visit a new chiropractor after that crash. It was Marco Panero ended up winning this race. He won it in dominant fashion, 10.5 seconds over Yanxi Lin in P number 2, and Avenger Dantes is going to round out your podium in 3rd, then Joao Tabino in 4th. Jason Green will round out your top 5, then Jeff Richter finishes in a fantastic 6th, the top of the Masters drivers there. Then Bobby West and Christian Kabanka will finish right behind, rounding out your top 8. Then Chris Murakami in 9th, Simon Mayer in 10th after being involved in a spin early on. Nice recovery drive from him. Alan McCain finishes in P11, Scott Russell in 12th. Nazelli ends up in P13 after that incident earlier on. We weren't expecting him to cut through the field like he did. However, he ends up in P13. Philip Berry in 14th, and Andre Favini will round out your top 15.
Yeah, in 16th is Tom Gradwell, York Monty in 17th, Paulo Brim in 18th, Jim Brewster 19th, Wilson Bruzarosco in 20th, Jason Perry in 21st, Kurt Nunez in 22nd, Pedro Carvalho 23rd, Andrew Love 24th, Brad Cathcart in 25th, Adam Bradshaw 26th, Joseph Tarantino 27th, Jesus Rodriguez 28th, Michel Voglini 29th, Hugh Simpkins 30th, Josh Wilkie 31st, Trenton Kramer 32nd, Jeff Jacobson 33rd, Mike Taylor 34th, and Russell Telker 35th. And that rounds out your 35 car field.
And a lot of those drivers finishing this race with far less body parts than they did before. The body parts on the car, I should clarify. We didn't see any maimings here during this race. So that rounds out the other results here from the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors at Belle Isle. A dramatic race we were expecting and a dramatic race we ended up getting here. I'm taking a look. We don't have any drivers waiting in the interview waiting area, so I think we'll wrap things up here in just a few moments' time. And I mentioned earlier on in this broadcast that the next track we're going to be visiting is another oddball, that being the Phoenix Road Course. So Charles, that's going to be an odd one. What do you expect from that race?
I don't know what to expect. I mean, it's Phoenix is a 1 mile oval normally. And so we're going to put a road course in the middle of it. I think it's going to have kind of a New Hampshire type feel to it. So it should be very interesting. It should be an interesting race. I think it's a lot of unknowns that we'll have to unpack during the course of that event next week.
That track is absolutely bizarre. I've driven it quite a decent amount in iRacing just because I'm just a sick, twisted bastard, or I just like driving very strange track and car combinations. But the Phoenix Road Course is a very oddball circuit. It no longer exists thanks to the renovations they did to Phoenix Raceway a couple of years ago, but it's preserved here in the Sin. It feels like it's paved over a sinking swamp, and is also very, very strange in its construction. You come off the oval and then back into the infield, and it's an oddball track that we're going to be visiting in 1 week's time, but I'm sure the drivers here from the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors series will turn that race into an instant classic. That'll be coming up in 1 week's time, and we've got action all around the clock here on Apex Racing TV, day in and day out, week in and week out. The Formula Ford and Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors, of course, completing our Super Sunday coverage here on Apex Racing TV. We've got the Apex Racing League Sports Car Series every single Monday. Season 1 of that season, Rennsport at Aragon, is coming up tomorrow afternoon, along with a Rickmatech World Challenge, round 1 of their 10th season. That's going to be pretty good. Fingers crossed it's a clean race, because I usually do the officiating for that. And then we have Homestead coming up, another Roval for the Ray Esports Racing League that Charles and I are a part of. Charles, would you like to give the viewers a quick little heads up as to what that race is going to be like in a few days' time?
So basically, that race is going to be, it's a pretty straightforward Roval. It uses about, I want to say, 2/3 or so of the oval track. So for the spec racers and the cars that we're going to have running, lots and lots of drafting. There'll be fights over who's going to be not the first car coming out of the infield. On the last lap, we saw just a hilarious sight the last time we were there. Cars were fighting to let somebody else go first. The winner of the race, I think, came from 0.8 of a second back down the tri-oval to win from third. So it'll be a very interesting race. It'll be lots of drafting. But it's a pretty fun little track. It's not overly technical, but there's a couple of things that usually catch the drivers out, and so we'll point those out on Tuesday.
And the Spec Racer Fords are going to be racing there that night. That is going to be one heck of a race in just a couple of days' time. So if all that action that we just talked about isn't enough to persuade you to subscribe here to Apex Racing TV, I really don't know what does. You'll be missing out if you do. That is for darn sure. But I think for this broadcast here of round 8 of the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors season here from season 2 of 2024, I think that will just about do it. So for myself, Ron Mons, Charles Bichelle joining me in the commentary booth, and Samuli Kumo doing a great job working all the cameras in the virtual production hauler, I say thank you all so very much for watching, and we'll see you all again in 1 week's time.